Greetings, adventurers. You're listening to The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood with me, Professor Atwood. I'm glad you're here, and I can't wait to tell you about my latest journey. Don't worry, it's a safe space. I'll handle all the danger for you. I designed these stories to help you relax, chill anxiety, and go to sleep. Maybe they'll even put a smile on your face, even if it's a sleepy smile. So please, settle in, relax, and prepare to quietly drift off with me to parts known, unknown, and even some places in between. Comfortable? Very well. Let's get underway. Good evening, adventurers. I hope you're doing well. I also hope you're all cozy and settled in because tonight I'm going to tell you about my rescue mission in the fake ancient temple ruins on the nefarious Professor P's hidden fake volcanic island. And, to be honest, I had quite a challenge in front of me. On the surface it seemed simple, but in reality it was going to be very much daunting and very complex. Now, as you remember, I had learned Professor P had kidnapped my assistant Bradley and his girlfriend/mercenary Delores from their vacation in Niagara Falls and stashed them away in a kidnappee lounge in fake temple ruins on the other side of the island. This happened right after I had completed Science Challenge number 2, creating a hovering personal transport vehicle for minions. Now, as you remember, there were 3 science challenges in total, which is of course why I came to this fake volcanic island lair in the first place. If I completed all 3, Professor P would tell me the whereabouts of my missing mentor, Professor Sampson, who went missing years ago. But there was much more to it than that, and more mysteries than I was anticipating. Things took an incredibly unexpected turn with the kidnapping of Bradley and Delores, of course. I had hiked all the way from the volcano to the temple ruins, and there I found a digital locked door, and I would have to employ cryptanalysis and possibly a side channel attack if I was to free them. Luckily, I brought custom umbrella number 4 with me, the CPU umbrella. Combined with my satellite uplink, I would have all the computing power I needed. But before I tell you about my latest challenge to essentially pick a digital lock and free my assistant and his girlfriend, I want to talk to you about a few things. First of all, we want to thank you again for all your support and for being here and listening to our stories. It's much appreciated, and we're also warmed by all the wonderful and supportive reviews you've been posting. Also, there are 2 types of shows in the podcast high-speed show feed. There are the regular episodes, such as what you're listening to right now, and Professor Atwood's Sleepscapes to give you more adventures per month. These sleepscapes are pulled directly from my adventures with all the music and sounds we collect on our journeys. We then remix and remaster them and make them longer so you can create your own adventure in your mind as you settle in and drift off to sleep. And as always, don't forget to rate and review the show and maybe post about the show, as that's how other adventurers find us. And if you want more info, merchandise, and donation and ad-free Patreon subscription options, you can also go to whitecatentertainment.com. And there's a little bit of bonus content there periodically as well. All right then, let's get back to the story. While Bradley and Delores did look calm and comfortable in the kidnappee lounge, there was a video feed to it in front of me. That didn't mean I could waste any time. I mean, the video feed was meant to rattle me and keep me off guard. I wanted to get them out of there as soon as possible and figure out what Professor P's overall plan was and thwart it. And I needed to thwart it good, if you'll forgive the slang. Anyway, I had a brief snack consisting of a granola bar, an apple, and a sparkling water, and then I got to work. I looked at all the symbols etched all over the walls, floor, and ceiling. They matched the symbols on the digital lock. If there was a pattern here, I didn't see it yet. These symbols seemed completely random. Some were atomic symbols. There was pi, of course. And there was even more elaborate symbols of Professor P holding up a trophy reading "World's Greatest Scientist." Well, first of all, inaccurate on many different levels, not the least of which was that it wasn't even a symbol. There was also a symbol that looked like a submarine, one that looked like a rhinoceros beetle, and one that looked like a head of lettuce. I think inadvertently, the randomness of the symbols was the clue itself. Professor P seemed to be going out of his way to force randomness inside these fake temple ruins, which meant he wanted me to spend my time searching for a pattern that didn't exist. This meant the digital door lock was completely random, and the amount of randomness of the symbols was a cunning red herring. Indeed, yes, I was convinced that was it. I needed to account for random symbols in a random order and not look for a pattern because there wasn't one. The whole search for meaning and a pattern was a red herring. But that got me thinking about red herrings as well. The origin of the saying is quite interesting. Now, a red herring is something that misleads or distracts from a relevant or important question. It may either be a logical fallacy or a literary device that leads readers or audiences toward a false conclusion. A red herring may be used intentionally, as in mystery fiction or as part of rhetorical strategies, like in politics, or may be used in argumentation inadvertently. To be honest, though, I think that's a bit rare. If you're planting a red herring, you generally know you're planting a red herring. Now, as an informal fallacy, unlike a classic fallacy, the red herring falls into a broad class of relevance fallacies. Unlike the straw man, which involves a distortion of the other party's position, the red herring is a seemingly plausible, though ultimately irrelevant, diversionary tactic. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, a red herring may be intentional or unintentional. It is not necessarily a conscious intent to mislead. Now, I have to politely disagree with the dictionary again a bit here. An unintentional red herring is pretty much called, a mistake. Red herrings by design are intended to mislead. In fiction and nonfiction, a red herring may be intentionally used by the writer to plant a false clue that leads readers or audiences towards a false conclusion. For example, the character of Bishop Aringarosa in Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code is presented for most of the novel as if he is at the center of the church's conspiracies, but is later revealed to have been innocently duped by the true antagonist of the story. The character's name is a loose Italian translation of red herring. Okay, now a red herring is also found in the Sherlock Holmes story A Study in Scarlet, where the murderer writes at the crime scene the word Rache, which means revenge in German, leading the police and the reader to mistakenly presume that a German was involved. A red herring is also often used in legal studies and exam problems to mislead and distract students from reaching a correct conclusion about a legal issue, intended as a device to test students' comprehension of underlying law and their ability to properly discern material, factual circumstances. Herrings kippered by smoking, salting, and artificially dyeing until made reddish-brown, in essence a red herring. Prior to refrigeration, kippers were known for being, strongly pungent. In 1807, William Cobbett wrote how he, as a child, together with other children, used a kipper to lead hunting dogs away from the scent of a hare the children intended to hunt. An apocryphal story that was quite possibly the origin of the idiom. He said, quote, "When I was a boy, we used to, in order to draw off the harriers from the trail of a hare that we had set down as our own private property, get to her haunt early in the morning and drag a red herring tied to a string 4 or 5 miles over hedges and ditches, across fields and through coppices, until we got to a point whence we were pretty sure the hunters would not return to the spot where they had been thrown off, and though I would by no means be understood as comparing the editors and proprietors of the London Daily Press to animals half so sagacious and so faithful as hounds, I cannot help thinking that, in the case in which we are referring, They must have been misled, at first, by some political deceiver. William Cobbett, February 14, 1807, Cobbett's Political Register, Volume 11. Now, obviously there's no fish species called a red herring, of course. Rather, it's a name given to a particularly strong kipper made from fish and herring, strongly cured in brine or heavily smoked. This process makes the fish particularly pungent smelling and, with strong enough brine, turns its flesh reddish. In this literal sense, as a strongly cured kipper, the term can be dated to the 13th century in the Anglo-Norman poem The Treatise by Walter of Bibsworth, which then first appears in Middle English in the early 14th century. Now, the figurative sense of red herring has traditionally been said to originate from a supposed technique of training scent hounds. There are variations of the story, but according to one version, the pungent red herring would be dragged along a trail until a puppy learned to follow the scent. Later, when the dog was being trained to follow the faint odor of a fox or a badger, the trainer would drag a red herring, whose strong scent confused the animal, perpendicular to the animal's trail to confuse the dog. The dog eventually learned to follow the original scent rather than the stronger scent. A variation of the story is given, without mention of its use in training, in the Macmillan Book of Proverbs, Maxims, and Famous Phrases, with the earliest use cited being from W.F. Butler's Life of Napier, published in 1849. Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable gave the full phrase as drawing a red herring across the path, an idiom meaning to divert attention from the main question by some side issue. Here, once again, a dried, smoked, and salted herring, when drawn across a fox's path, destroys the scent and sets the hounds at fault. Another variation of the dog story is given by Robert Hendrickson, 1994, who says escaping convicts used the pungent fish to throw off hounds in pursuit. So interestingly, the origin of the phrase red herring is in dispute and seems to have red herrings of its own. Anyway, I was still sure this fake ancient temple symbol forced randomization was in and of itself a red herring, trying to get me to discover a pattern that didn't exist, and thus run out of time and lose the final science challenge. So that meant I would have to take another approach and basically hack the digital lock, most likely with a side channel attack. I had custom umbrella number 4, my CPU umbrella, connected to my satellite phone, and I noticed an Ethernet port right in the door. That was unusual, but it would make connecting and hacking the door much easier. I wondered if it was an oversight of the minion construction foreman, but I also wondered if it wasn't. I sat down, tried to make myself as comfortable as possible, and got to work. I needed to focus on side channel and brute force attacks to find the random order of the random symbols, all of it just dripping with forced randomness. There was no algorithm, no pattern, and that was where I would focus my efforts, creating a program that took only randomness into account to unlock this door and free my assistant and his girlfriend. I would have to put my hacker hat on, something I didn't love doing, and to be honest, it wasn't necessarily my area of expertise either. The interface was quite easy to gain access to, especially with the Ethernet port. I could bridge computing power through umbrella number 4 and the satellite phone, which could also draw from a server farm in Switzerland as well, where I once did a favor for a computer engineer who thought he was seeing robot ghosts. After locking down his facility, doing paranormal sweeps along with scans for nanobot technology, and not finding anything out of the ordinary, it turned out the computer engineer just needed less coffee and new glasses. Sometimes the simplest explanations are the correct ones. Occam's razor. Embarrassed, he gave me lifetime access to their server farm and all its computing power, as long as I didn't mine Bitcoin with it, whatever that meant. I got to work creating the random hacking program. It was tedious, slow work. and I wondered how much time I had for this third challenge, and if Professor P counted the hike as part of the first day. But since it was the third challenge, I should have 3 days. I made as much progress as I could, and at the end of the day, a hidden door swung open, revealing a hotel room with a bed, bathroom, and dinner waiting for me. At least the Science Challenge protocol rules were being followed. No unnecessary discomfort during challenges. While I was eating dinner, I noticed another hidden note from Chef Chet, my mysterious ally. It was not cryptic at all, and it was very brief, and it just said, "Be careful, Professor Atwood." And since I knew it was on edible paper, I immediately ingested it and knew that I should take this warning seriously. I finished my dessert, which was strawberry shortcake, which was nice and light, but also delicious. I thought about the hacking I would need to do tomorrow and Chef Chet's note, but I was so exhausted, I was able to go to bed and go to sleep quite quickly. The next morning, I continued my work and checked on Bradley and Delores. They seemed to be doing just fine and looked more bored than anything. They were still not showing any concern, which was good. As I worked, I thought about hacking and hackers. Now, a hacker is a person skilled in information technology who achieves goals by non-standard means. The term has become associated in popular culture with a security hacker, someone with knowledge of bugs or exploits to break into computer systems and access data which would otherwise be inaccessible to them, well, for good reason. In a positive connotation, though, hacking can also be utilized by legitimate figures in legal situations. For example, law enforcement agencies sometimes use hacking techniques to collect evidence on criminals and other malicious actors. This could include using anonymity tools such as a VPN or the dark web to mask their identities online and pose as criminals. Hacking can also have a broader sense of any roundabout solution to a problem, or programming and hardware development in general, and hacker culture has spread the term's broader usage to the general public, even outside the professional or hobby of electronics. Well, in other words, a life hack, which everyone seems to like and enjoy. Mainstream usage of the word hacker mostly refers to computer criminals, due to the mass media usage of the word since the 1990s. This includes what hacker jargon calls script kiddies, less skilled criminals who rely on tools written by others with very little knowledge about the way they work. This usage has become so predominant that the general public is largely unaware that different meanings exist. Through this self-designation of hobbyists as hackers is generally acknowledged and accepted by computer security hackers, people from the programming subculture consider the computer intrusion-related usage incorrect and emphasize the difference between the two, calling security breakers crackers, analogous to a safecracker, I suppose. The controversy is usually based on the assertion that the term originally meant someone messing about with something in a positive sense, that is, using playful cleverness to achieve a goal. But then the term shifted over the decades and came to refer to computer criminals. As the security-related usage has spread more widely, the original meaning has become less known. In popular usage and in the media, computer intruders or computer criminals is the exclusive meaning of the word. In computer enthusiast and hacker culture, the primary meaning is a complementary description for a particularly brilliant programmer or technical expert. A large segment of the technical community insists the latter is the correct usage, as in the jargon file definition. However, Fred Shapiro thinks that the common theory that hacker originally was a benign term and the malicious connotations of the word were a later perversion is untrue. He found that the malicious connotations were already present at MIT in 1963, quoting the Tech, an MIT student newspaper, and at the time referred to unauthorized users of the telephone network, that is, the phreaker movement, that developed into the computer security hacker subculture of today. Still, there are different types of hackers with altruistic or malicious intentions, even though they often use similar methods. Civic hackers use their security and/or programming acumens to create solutions, often public and open-sourced, addressing challenges relevant to neighborhoods, cities, states, or countries, and the infrastructure within them. Municipalities and major government agencies such as NASA have been known to host hackathons or promote a specific date as a National Day of Civic Hacking to encourage participation from civic hackers. Civic hackers, though often operating autonomously and independently, may work alongside or in coordination with certain aspects of government or local infrastructure such as trains and buses. For example, in 2008, Philadelphia-based civic hacker William Entrikin developed a web application that displayed a comparison of the actual arrival times of local SEPTA trains to their scheduled times after being reportedly frustrated by the discrepancy. Security hackers are people involved with circumvention of computer security. There are several types, including white hat. These are hackers who work to keep data safe from other hackers by finding system vulnerabilities that can be mitigated. White hats are usually employed by the target system's owner and are typically paid, sometimes quite well, for their work. Their work is not illegal because it is done with the system owner's consent. Black hat or cracker. These hackers have malicious intentions. They often steal, exploit, and sell data, and are usually motivated by personal gain. Their work is usually quite illegal. A cracker is like a black hat hacker, but is specifically someone who is very skilled and tries via hacking to make profits or to benefit, not just to vandalize. Crackers find exploits for system vulnerabilities and often use them to their advantage by either selling the fix to the system owner or selling the exploit to other black hat hackers, who in turn use it to steal information or gain royalties. Gray hat. Computer security experts who may sometimes violate laws or typical ethical standards, but do not have the malicious intent typical of a black hat hacker. But, I'm not really sure who labels the hackers, as they tend to label themselves with the hat they choose, not necessarily with the hat that fits. But that's really neither here nor there. Anyway, after 2 days resulting in tired, blurry eyes, I had done it. I had created a specialized hacking program based on cryptanalysis, random symbol generation, and focusing on a side-channel attack to gain access quicker and more effectively. Hopefully I was getting closer to opening the door to the Kidnappees lounge in the fake ancient temple. There was nothing left to do but to test it. I ran the program and my custom CPU umbrella and my satellite phone suddenly became quite warm as they maximized their processing speed, power, and bandwidth. I held my breath as the program did its work. Slowly but surely, it matched the symbols. There was a low ding as each symbol locked into position on the door. Soon they were all locked into place, and yes, they were completely random, with symbols for trees, frisbees, and a radar dish included. I knew they were random because not one of them was Professor P accepting the trophy for World's Greatest Scientist. Now, the digital lock flashed for a moment, showing a few stars, and then the heavy door swung open with a loud hydraulic whoosh. Bradley and Delores got up off the couch and came to the door. Bradley smiled and said, "Professor Atwood, I presume?" As he always does when we haven't seen each other for a while, or if one of us gets captured, lost in time, or swallowed by a dinosaur. Smiling, I gave the standard response. "Yes, I feel thankful that I am here to welcome you," which was the response presumably made by Dr. Livingston all those years ago. We hugged warmly, and I shook both their hands vigorously. I apologized for not freeing them both sooner, and Bradley and Delores just shrugged. They looked at each other with a shared smile and said they weren't worried. The minions may have done a decent job of creating a kidnappee lounge to contain normal kidnappees, but as a security officer / mercenary, Delores was no normal kidnappee. She already did a visual sweep for stress points and weaknesses, and found at least 3 she could have exploited to free them at any time, including the classic one, through the ventilation system. But since she and Bradley's vacation was interrupted with a kidnapping, they used that extra time to relax and just chill for a bit, and didn't want to interrupt my flow, or even possibly disqualify my challenge if the kidnappees escaped on their own. You know, that made perfect sense. If the kidnappees escaped on their own, things definitely would have gone into dispute with the Science Villains Council over a nullified third science challenge, and that would have delayed things for weeks with evil hearings and science villain vacation schedules. But I had to ask, as savvy as Delores was, how were semi-competent minions, led by Dapper Science John and Professor Roughhouse, able to capture them in Niagara Falls? Delores and Bradley smiled even wider and said they saw them coming a mile away, as they didn't even bother to use rotor hush technology on their helicopters. So wait a minute, I said, as I realized what happened. You two let yourselves get captured? Delores replied, of course. If Professor P was trying to kidnap us during our vacation, that may mean you could use a little assistance. So we let ourselves get captured so we could help you. I said that was quite generous and thoughtful, but scolded them both for putting themselves in danger on my account, especially when on vacation. But they both pushed back and said they would hear no more of it, and it was their decision to allow to be kidnapped or not. I smiled in spite of myself and thanked them for their help. The truth was, I would probably need it to get to the bottom of Professor P's plans and thwart them. And I will tell you all about how I finally uncovered Professor P's nefarious plans and my attempt to thwart them next time. But before I end this evening's story, I want to talk to you about something. Through all the chaos, science challenges, and evil machinations, we sometimes forget about selflessness. Selflessness is, of course, putting others before yourself, and not to be too dramatic about it, but that's how a society grows and achieves a higher level of consciousness and peace. I know it's not completely scientific, but I believe it holds true, whatever the situation. Anyway, Bradley and Delores allowed themselves to get captured by Dapper Science John and Professor Roughhouse because they thought I needed help, and they deliberately didn't escape on their own as to not jeopardize my third science challenge and my chance to find my missing mentor, Professor Sampson. You see, being selfless can consist of acts both large and small, from volunteering to be the one lowered into an active volcano to manually configure and detonate a lava dampening device at the bottom, to saving the last scone in the break room for a colleague who was running late. It all matters. It all counts. So be selfless, and you'll be doing your part moving society forward. And if you save the last scone for me, I will most certainly appreciate it. Good night, adventurers.
The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood was created, written, and performed by Chris Mancini and produced by White Cat Entertainment. It is a work of fiction. Maybe. Music and sound design by Ron Tansky at rontanskymusic.com. For more info and merchandise, including t-shirts, mugs, and blankets, go to whitecatentertainment.com.